Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Ultimate Fashion History's FAVE Film Fashion Series. All right, I know that this time I'm sort of stretching the definition of film, but I really have to talk about my all-time favorite television sitcom. I'm taking us back to 1985 for The Golden Girls, starring Beatrice Arthur, Betty White, Rue McClanahan, and Estelle Getty, created by Susan Harris, with costumes by the very elegant and quite genius Judy Evans. And if you don't mind, I would like to dedicate this episode of Faith Film Fashion to my own favourite Golden Girl. My late mother, Sunny Wolfe, she really was influenced by the Golden Girls, and the best way to describe my mother is she was sort of Blanche Devereaux with an English accent. So, Mum, this one's for you. Now, before I begin, I have to tell you why I'm creating this Golden Girls Faith Film Fashion episode. Well, to quote Rose Nylund, quoting Network, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." So why am I so irritated? Well, as you know, recently and very happily, there's been a resurgence of interest in the Golden Girls. Hulu have just picked it up, and the internet is swimming with memes and pictures of our four favorite ladies. I am very happy that this is happening. Those of us who have watched it all along are all very glad that a whole new generation, the millennials, are discovering the wonderful wit and wisdom of the Golden Girls. But with this renaissance of interest has come, I think, a real misunderstanding of the fashion and the beauty in Golden Girls. There are dozens of articles and blogs floating around the internet at the moment with titles like this: Golden Girls' Ugliest Outfits, Fashion Nightmares, Golden Girls. Did the wardrobe department on Golden Girls hate Bea Arthur? No! I think the problem here is that there is a misunderstanding about fashion in the 80s and the intent of the fashion in Golden Girls. And then I think about my own students. They are millennials, and don't get me wrong, I love millennials. I teach them every day. They are completely adorbs and I adore them. They come to class saying, "I love the 80s. I love the 80s. I can't wait till we get to the 80s. The 80s are my favorite fashion decade." And then I show them the Golden Girls and suddenly they hate the 80s. What? They can't believe their eyes. Some students actually think that Judy Evans's costumes for the Golden Girls were parodies or comedy satires on 80s fashion, and nothing could be further from the truth. So what I want to do here is set the record straight. Yes, it is the very first Ultimate Fashion History intervention. I'm going to talk about fashion, I'm going to talk about beauty, and I'm going to warn against the dangers of decontextualizing fashion. Now listen, I'm not one to blow my own Turbanflurgen, is that right? But I think this is going to be a good one. But before we even turn to fashion, I just want to quickly clear up a misunderstanding that some younger fans who weren't around in the 80s might have about the sitcom's location. Of course, Golden Girls is set in Miami. Well, because people traditionally retire to Miami, there's this sort of sense that the reason Golden Girls was set there was because these were old ladies and they were all retired at the end of their lives. No! In the 1980s, Miami was what I call a cultural hotspot. Every decade, there is a location on the globe that somehow just speaks to the cultural imagination. Think about Egypt in the 1920s, Africa in the 30s, Latin America in the 40s, all tied in with Roosevelt's good neighbor policy, Paris in the 50s, swinging London in the 60s, and in the 1980s, it was Miami. Miami was just seen as the steamiest, sexiest, coolest place on the planet. One of the first big movies of the decade was very steamy, Body Heat. Everybody was talking about Body Heat. That was set in Miami. There was a whole new music revolution coming out of Miami with bands like the Miami Sound Machine, with a very young Gloria Estefan there. Miami was the center of the whole salsa revival. Those of you who were around in the 80s, as I was, you might remember how we all rushed to salsa lessons. It was the big thing. Miami Vice was set in Miami, so Miami was a really cool place. And this is why these cool ladies lived there. And far from being retired, every single one of them worked. Dorothy was a substitute teacher. Blanche was the director of a museum. Rose had a few jobs. She starts off as a counselor, and then she goes through a phase of being a tester for new products. Even Sophia, in her 80s, had jobs at the start of the series. She worked in a cowboy-themed restaurant, didn't she? I guess she must have liked working in themed restaurants, because she later went on to have a job at a pirate-themed restaurant. So no, these ladies didn't go to Miami to die. They went to Miami to live. And by God, they did. I can't overstate how revolutionary it was, and how Judy Evans, with her costumes and her vision for the Golden Girls, really did change the perception of how women over 50 should dress. Now, on television prior to the Golden Girls, women over 50, women over 60 looked like this. They were costumed to look like grandmothers. It was almost like they all came from central casting, with their little glasses and their grey hair in a bun and their lacy collars, this kind of thing. Well, our golden grandmothers didn't really look like that, did they? Judy Evans absolutely and genuinely changed fashion, and the Golden Girls started a retail revolution. Well, Judy Evans had a gift to begin with a wonderful looking cast. Of course, Rue McClanahan was a stunningly beautiful woman, and Betty White was so pretty, wasn't she? So soft and lovely, with this gorgeous halo of platinum hair. Bea Arthur was tall, statuesque, elegant, and Estelle Getty was completely adorable as Sophia, although of course she was playing 25 years older than her real self. And when you see her without her Sophia garb and makeup, she's every bit as attractive as the other ladies. So not only did Judy Evans create a retail revolution in the perception of how older women wanted to dress, she also costumed all of the Golden Girls completely to character. Lots of the costumes and outfits and sweaters were bought off the peg, but many were designed and created by Judy Evans and her team herself. But what's so interesting is that even the bespoke costumes in Golden Girls actually look like they were bought in a department store, which is perfect. There is no leap of faith with her costumes. You absolutely believe that these are real women and these are their real wardrobes. Wardrobes bought on a budget. Let's take our girls one by one, look at their costumes, look at their style, and then discuss the misconception that some younger people today might have about their looks. Let's start, of course, with Dorothy. Believe it or not, the character that most women aspire to look like was Dorothy. Take a look at what she's wearing here. It's pure Dorothy Zbornak, isn't it? The slouchy, oversized sweater, the longish skirt, and those slouchy boots. This really was a contemporary and trendy silhouette in the 1980s, oversized. She had a thing for these cowl neck sweaters and blouses too. And Dorothy was rather a dramatic character, and so this sense of drama was also portrayed in her costumes, with lots of bold colours, bold graphic prints, very dramatic. This outfit, however, is the one that the internet seems to dislike the most. Her long satin, sort of pseudo tuxedo skirt suit. And there it is in close-up. People today, many people, are horrified by this outfit. It's so unfair, and I'll show you why in a second. Diana, Princess Diana, arguably one of the big style icons of the 1980s, had a very similar outfit, the satin blazer with the bow tie. People have also really made fun of Dorothy's wedding dress in the finale. No spoilers there, come on, we've all seen Golden Girls. Here's a detail. People don't get it. What's going on here? It's so over the top. What's this sort of strange satin roll, sort of like medieval slash and puff without the puff? Well, remember, this is what wedding dresses looked like in the 80s. They were so over the top, had so many weird embellishments on them. It started with Diana, really, didn't it, at the beginning of the decade with her outrageous wedding dress. Look, that's Cindy Crawford in a dress that is pure Dorothy. So over the top. So these were not comedy costumes. These were not satires. These were true reflections of how women aspired to dress. And they were very real costumes. Take a look at this. It's from, I think, a J.C. Penney catalogue from the 1980s. Look at the cowl neck. Look at the drop waist. Look at the length of the hemline. It's exactly the kind of dress that Dorothy would wear. Now, remember that loud-coloured satin tuxedo? Well, take a look at Prince here. Everybody loves lovely Prince, and I do too. He looks completely terrific in his sort of metallic purple trench coat there. But you know what? Add a bow tie. It's pure Zbornak. Don't detextualize fashion. This is what I'm always telling my students. There is nothing comedic or awful or ugly about the Golden Girls costumes. They were true reflections of what women like Blanche and Dorothy and Rose and Sophia would see on television, and then they would go to stores and buy something similar. Back in St. Olaf, I don't know what Rose Nylund wore, so let's pick it up with her Miami wardrobe. Again, Judy Evans really dressed to character. Rose was ladylike and sweet and delicate and innocent, and her wardrobe really reflected this, with a lot of dresses with pussy bow blouses, shirt dresses, all very neat and ladylike. But what Rose is most made fun of on the internet today are her novelty sweaters. She seemed to have quite a few of them. This one in particular is now actually duplicated on t-shirts and worn ironically. But there was nothing ironic about Rose's sweaters, because the novelty sweater was one of the big trends of the 1980s. So again, the girls are just wearing what people wore. It's not for comic effect. Take a look at this. My students would look at this and say, oh my God, I love those sweaters. I love the 80s. Rose would love these sweaters too. Take a look at this so quintessentially 1980s drop-waisted pastel lace and satin dress, again from a catalogue, and pure Rose. Picture it. Miami, 1985. Yes, we're going to talk about Sophia. Now, Sophia, as you know, played a character far older than actress Estelle Getty actually was. She was B. Arthur's mum. And so Judy Evans really had to communicate this, because if you look at Estelle Getty's face, yes, she has aging makeup on, but she doesn't look like a woman in her 80s. And so at the beginning of this series and the beginning of every season, there are quite a few scenes that have Sophia in the typical central casting old lady attire with the lace collar and the cameo. But because she was true to character, Sophia is a spunky woman, and she would not dress like an old lady all the time. And in each season, as the episodes progress and it is established to new viewers that, yes, Sophia is an older lady, she actually wears some pretty cute outfits, really pulled together, like this little skirt suit here with that wonderful ruffled blouse. Again, just to remind you that Estelle Getty was of the same age as the other cast members, more or less. Judy Evans couldn't really have such contemporary fun with the character as she did with the others, although there are moments when Sophia gets kind of up to date, like this denim shirt here with the gingham collar. And she even jumps on some of the decade's hottest fashion trends. And yet, when Sophia is supposed to look elegant, she does look elegant, like this wonderful, almost Edith Piaf-y crepe and sequined evening gown. And you'll notice that she's carrying a very chic and elegant little evening bag that of course goes perfectly with her dress. She is not carrying her regular handbag that even Sophia refers to as her old lady's handbag. Why? Well, that would have been a cheap stunt, wouldn't it? Putting Sophia in a beautiful evening gown and then giving her her handbag. That would have been a sight gag. And there were no comedy costumes, not in their regular wardrobes anyway, in Golden Girls, and this really speaks to how clever it was. But surely Judy Evans had the most fun when working on the wardrobe for that sexy southern vixen, Blanche Devereaux. Of course, Blanche was a character who was very sexual, very in touch with her femininity, and her wardrobe reflects this, with lots of floating chiffon. But she liked the glamour too, so lots of sequins, lots of embellishment. And of course, she was a very sexy lady, so a lot of bosom-heaving, low-cut tops. And yet, this wasn't taken to a comedy extreme either. When Blanche Devereaux was going to work, she wore perfectly reasonable outfits that still spoke to her sense of femininity, her sexiness, but they weren't sort of comedy outfits. She didn't go to work wearing a bosom-heaving low-cut blouse. But she did like her sparkles and her bling. And of course, this is one of the most famous costumes from the whole show. This was supposed to be Blanche Devereaux's wedding dress that she could still fit into, although when she turned around, you see that she couldn't zip it up. I always think that Blanche Devereaux's wardrobe, and I think this is genius, absolutely brilliant, is very much inspired by Joan Collins in Dynasty. And this is perfect because isn't Blanche exactly the kind of person who would watch Dynasty and be very impressed with Alexis Carrington and her sexiness and her glamour, and then go to real-life retail at a price point she could afford and buy something similar. Look at this. I think this is from a J.C. catalogue, actually. And it is pure Blanche Devereaux. So even with Blanche's costumes, where Judy Evans really could have played the comedy card, she doesn't. She keeps everything within the realms of believability. But what everyone agrees on in terms of Blanche Devereaux are her wonderful, floating, sexy robes. Fans actually have a name for them. They call them Deverobes, which I think is absolutely clever and brilliant. After Rue McClanahan passed, there was an estate sale, and there is a website for the estate sale, and I think some items are still on sale. It's called estateofrue.com, and it is here that I found some of the original Deverobes. Rue McClanahan kept all of these from the series and would wear them in her daily life. Don't you love this? These were made for her for the series. This kimono sleeved robe here with the huge pink roses is absolutely gorgeous. Right, I want to tell you something kind of neat and cool, and I got so excited last night. So I was on estateofrue.com, and of course I started just fiddling around and browsing because it was so interesting to see what one of my favorite actresses had in her personal wardrobe and her personal jewelry collection. In her costume jewelry appeared this absolutely fantastic Diamante articulated jaguar pin. I screamed when I saw this because, and I didn't know this, in my own jewelry box I have exactly the same brooch. And here's Django modeling it for you. So this was a very happy moment for me because it convinced me once and for all that Rue McClanahan is my spirit animal. Before we turn to hair and beauty, I'm hoping you'll just indulge me for a second. As I went through the characters, you may have noticed a little sketch of each of the Golden Girls, and these sketches were done by my dad, David Wolfe. Now, if you've been following any of my videos, you may have picked up on the fact that David Wolfe, my dad, was the guy who invented fashion forecasting, and he's sort of like an industry expert consultant, but he started his career as a fashion illustrator, and a few years ago, just for his hobby, he started making paper dolls. And every Christmas he does a special freebie paper doll for all of his followers, and last year he did the Golden Girls, and these are his paper dolls of the Golden Girls. And then what he did on the subsequent page was give them Christmassy outfits that he invented that kind of speak to each of their characters. It's really fun, isn't it? And I really think, tell me if you agree, that he did a pretty good job on their facial likenesses. But his real stock in trade in terms of his paper doll enterprise, golden age of Hollywood, with all of our favorite movies and stars. If you're interested in that kind of thing, check out his website, Paper Dollywood. It's called paperdollywood.com, and all of his paper dolls are published through Paper Doll Press. So now on to more Golden Girls. Another aspect of the Golden Girls that people tend to make fun of is the palette. Okay, people are generally all right with all of the bright colours that the Golden Girls wear, because of course everybody knows that bright colours were in the 80s. But what people grapple with and don't really like is the use of pastel. So much pastel in the Golden Girls. Look at the Golden Girls living room, all of these corals and pale pinks and pale turquoise. They don't like it. And of course, a lot of these pastels were reflected in the Golden Girls' wardrobe. Well, guess what? These were the hot colours of the 1980s too. It wasn't just brights. Look at Don Johnson over here from Miami Vice. He made it okay for men to wear pastels. It was one of the things that people talked about and loved in Miami Vice. Pastels, along with brights, were the big colour wave of the 1980s. Take a look at these fashion images here. And again, these soft mauves and pale pinks and corals and rose tones, no pun intended. And again here. And again here. So the Golden Girls were completely on trend with their pastel wardrobes, and so when it comes to their palette, they get the last laugh. Another aspect of the Golden Girls costume that people make fun of are the shoulder pads. They all wore shoulder pads, and sometimes these shoulder pads got enormous. Well, come on guys, this is Fashion History 101, which is actually one of the courses I teach. Everyone had big shoulder pads in the 1980s. Look at this high fashion image with shoulder pads much larger than the Golden Girls. And what about this? So, by wearing shoulder pads, again, the girls were just on trend. My own students, when we look at the Golden Girls in terms of what older women aspire to look like in the 1980s, are particularly upset with the Golden Girls' hair. They say it's old ladies' hair. Excuse me? Rue McClanahan's haircut was very similar to fashion icon Princess Diana. Bea Arthur's hair was not so different to Pat Benatar's. And Rose Nylund really had the same hairdo as Madonna at a certain point in her career in the 80s. So no, they didn't have old ladies' hair. They had 1980s hair. See, the fashion in the Golden Girls wasn't a parody or a satire or a joke or used for comedic purposes. It was a reflection of what was happening in fashion and retail on the broader cultural landscape. And yet, Judy Evans absolutely still costumed to character. And I can prove it, because if we just switch their heads around a bit, It's no longer the Golden Girls. These three characters couldn't wear each other's wardrobes because when they did, it was used to comedic effect on the few occasions when this happened, like when Blanche lent Sophia one of her sexy low-cut red dresses for a date. Yet there were one or two costumes that were used purely for comedic effect and made fun of contemporary fashion trends, like the keep fit trend, or the graphic tee, look, I'm ready, take me hurricane, really sort of feeding into the whole Frankie says relax, and all of those kind of slogan t-shirts. My favorite comedy costumes are these two. I still laugh looking at them, but it really shows you, doesn't it, what lovely figures Betty White and Rue McClanahan had. This is when they were appearing in an amateur production of Cats. But my favorite comedy costumes in Golden Girls has got to be when see, I'm laughing just thinking about it before I show you the picture. When Dorothy and Sophia perform at the community centre talent show as Sonny and Cher. So funny. All four of the actresses in Golden Girls won Emmy Awards, which is brilliant because every year they won, they were actually up against each other for the award, which can't have been easy. But they all eventually, and quite deservedly, won Emmys for their incredible performances bringing these women to life. And now a whole new generation of fans are falling in love with them too, and with it comes a whole slew of new retail products paying homage to the Golden Girls. Sweatshirts, t-shirts, I love this. Sophia Petrillo is my spirit animal. So much great merchandise. Just go on Etsy, type in the Golden Girls and see what some of these funny, creative and talented craftsmen and craftswomen have come up with. It sold out immediately when it was launched a year or so ago, the Golden Girls action figures. You couldn't get these for love nor money. There's Golden Girls bobbleheads. There's a wonderful book called Golden Girls Forever, an unauthorized look behind the lanai by Jim Colucci. Great book. There's even a Golden Girls puppet show. Check out Google, see when it's playing. It might be coming to you soon. What a fun and great idea. And I recently read that there is a Golden Girls restaurant opening in Manhattan. You can better believe it, Dad and I will be there. All this understood, it'll come as no surprise that many people have Golden Girls tattoos. I don't know who this man is. I tried to find out. I did a Google search. Don't know who he is, but all I can say is #hero. Well, I hope this video has cleared up some of the misunderstandings floating about the fashion on Golden Girls. Yes, laugh at 1980s fashion. The 80s was an excess of excess. Laugh at the shoulder pads, the oversized novelty sweaters, the pastel palette and all of that. But don't laugh at the Golden Girls fashion. It was simply a reflection of what was going on at the time. But please carry on laughing at the Golden Girls, one of history's funniest comedies. You can get in touch with me via my website, amandahalley.com. Join our Facebook group where we love talking about this kind of stuff. Click the little circle to subscribe because I'll be back very soon with more FAVE film fashion on the ultimate fashion history. And thanks for watching. And as always, thank you for being a friend. Bye for now.